Hello, everybody, and welcome to this month's Specifying Practice Group call.
Thanks, Matt. And we're going to dispense with the formal introductions today for Lewis and me. We have 7 presenters today, and doing this Pecha Kucha style, we have only about 7 minutes for each speaker. So I'm going to be the official timekeeper, and I will try to let everybody know when there's about a minute left. And we're not going to allow them to run over. So if you have questions, do get them fired off, and we'll try to pick them up as we can between speakers. So,
or you can tweet questions, and we might be able to answer either the speaker or one of us can respond to it after the session has closed. That tweet hash is, of course, the hash sign CSISPG.
Okay, so with that, our first speaker is Dave Metzger, FCSI, FAIA, double fellow, retired. How good is that? I think all of us would really love to be there. Okay, so Dave, you're up. 7 minutes.
All right, can you hear me? Dave Stutzman emailed me a few weeks ago and asked me to be a participant in this August Specifying Practice Group meeting. He asked, what are you passionate about that you'd like to share with other specifiers, product reps, and contractors? Well, passion and specifications are 2 words that are not usually mentioned together. But in thinking about it, I do care very strongly about good drawing specification coordination and the use of consistent terminology. My clients and I have spent many hours in each project meeting on these topics. I titled my presentation, The Forest, the Trees, and the Leaves. What's the point? One of the reasons I like specifying is because it involves a whole process of building, design, and construction. I know it sounds ironic given that we specifiers are all detail-focused, obsessive-compulsives, but more than anything else, specifiers are generalists. The details, of course, are important, but they have to be viewed holistically. We have to be able to see not only the leaves, but also the trees and the forest, and be able to switch this focus instantly. And to do that takes experience and good judgment. As an example of drawing specification coordination, I'm going to use a project for which I wrote the specifications, the new headquarters for NPR in Washington, which opened maybe a year and a half ago. This was a new office building. Could we have the first slide, please, Lewis or Dave? Not this one, but the overall building. That's it. This was a new office building that incorporated a historic Art Deco warehouse into the design, both interior and exterior. There are in particular 2 portions of the design that took a lot of coordination with the designers. The exterior window wall with custom laminated glass wall fins, and as would be expected for a broadcast studio, the acoustic finishes. The kind of top bay is the window wall with the fins. Can we have the next slide? There were decorative glass fins clipped onto the aluminum window wall fins. These decorative glass fins were fabricated of laminated glass, 2 lights of half-inch thick glass with both clear and colored interlayers laminated between them. There were 6 different color combinations. Next slide. We showed we called each color combination a color group, and we used this designation on the drawings to indicate which fin received which color group. So this is an example of a page from the specification. It's a little bigger than the screens, so you can't see the very top of it. But the point was we explained in detail color group 1, color group 2, and so on, the overall Pantone color match, and then that's better, thank you, and then the makeup of the specific colors that made up that Pantone color group. This was based on Saflex's Vanciva interlayer system. So all that was on the drawings was color group number 3, period. Much more complex were the acoustic finishes, which we use for both broadcast areas and non-broadcast areas. We worked not only with the architect's designers on this, but also the architect's broadcast consultant. There were 6
Dave?
different types. Yes.
Could I ask you a question on the colors?
Yeah.
You probably knew up front before you'd actually selected what color you wanted that you were going to have 3, 4, 5, 6 colors, so the drawings could go ahead and say color group 1, color group 2, so forth.
Well, during
Before
design,
the final colors were selected.
the final colors were selected before we did the specification.
Okay. Okay.
I'm not sure I completely follow the question, but
No, that's, I was just curious. I was just wondering if the designers had already thought that they were going to use, you know, a group of 5 or 6 colors, and they could go ahead and start naming the colors on the drawings with these with this terminology before the final color selections had been made.
That's the advantage of having a very simple descriptor. If the specific combination of colors that made up, say, color group 5 changes, as long as color group 5 was going to be in the same location, there's no change to the drawing.
Yeah.
And that's the advantage of keeping notes on the drawings as generic as possible. On the acoustic finishes, there were 6 different types of acoustic finishes, plus variations in each type. So we had a total of 14 different acoustic products to specify. In the broadcast areas, we had acoustic panels. There were absorptive panels, 2 types of those, reflective panels, 3 types of those, and diffusive panels, 5 types of those, plus the owner's NPR's existing panels, which would be salvaged from their existing studios. Initially, I was just going to have, as I've done on other projects, 1 section for acoustic panels, but it quickly became apparent that this was too cumbersome. So I ended up specifying having a separate specification section for each panel, one for acoustic, or excuse me, one for absorptive, one for reflective, and one for diffusive panels. Each type had its unique alphabetic designation. For example, APA, APR, and APD for acoustic panel, absorptive, reflective, and diffusive, respectively, and then a numeric suffix after that to indicate each variation within the type. And again, that alphanumeric designator was what was used on the drawings to indicate each panel type. Whether the panels were located on the walls or the ceilings, and we had both, was irrelevant to the designator. Since the drawings show the panel locations, the designator just had to indicate what the panel type and variation was. In the non-broadcast areas, we didn't have the same type of acoustic panels. We had 3 different types of acoustic finishes. Acoustic plaster, a product called Basilfon. This is typically used on ceilings. It's a synthetic plaster that's put over a glass fiber substrate. So in the finished product, it looks like gypsum board. It's a very nice product. Expensive, but a very nice product.
Dave, you're going to have to wrap up soon here.
Thank you. We had a stretched fabric wall covering, and we had absorptive wall panels of melamine foam. This slide shows the melamine foam panels to the right and left, and then the last slide, the next one, shows a typical broadcast studio with the acoustic panels in there. So basically, again, the concept was keep drawings and keep the notes on the drawings as generic as possible, and just use the alphanumeric designator to link back to the specifications. Okay. Did I make my 7 minutes?
Great.
Thank you, Dave.
Yeah. So we do have a couple of questions and or comments, I guess. Sheldon just wants to make sure that we keep everything moving, so give all of our presenters a time that they deserve. Okay, so next up we have Liz O'Sullivan. And I know that Liz has been writing about some of this topic on her blog, and I think that this is going to be a follow-up. So if you haven't seen her blog, here's the plug. Go check it out, and you'll see the rest of the story behind the presentation. Are you ready, Liz?
Yep. Thanks, Dave. So, specifiers can help prevent scope busts, which helps the project. It helps the architect, it helps the project, it helps the owner. Writing specifications is a subtractive process rather than an additive process. We don't start with a blank sheet and add stuff. We start with a sheet full of information and delete what we don't need, or else we're given a bunch of options and we only check the options that we need, but we see everything. I take a subtractive approach to preparing my project manual's table of contents too, and I know that many other spec writers prepare tables of contents the same way. Because of this approach, and because we use, oh Louis, if you could go back to the last one, the Legos.
Got ahead of you.
Because we use the table of contents as a roadmap for the project, specifiers are better positioned to notice missing design scope before the architect or anyone else realizes something's missing. And this can prevent embarrassment or change orders, depending on when things would ordinarily get noticed by others. I include a table of contents with my fee and services proposal. When I'm preparing this, sometimes I have the architect's DD drawings to look at. Sometimes I just have a concept design narrative from the architect. Even if there are no drawings, I include a table of contents. I know I'll need at least one roof type, there will be at least one wall assembly, so I have an idea of how many spec sections I'm going to need to address all those things. I approach the project from a point of view of the whole picture. I want to consider every spec section we might possibly need. Then I remove from the list what we don't need, and there's my table of contents. I want to make sure I'm thinking of everything so I don't get burned on fee by overlooking something. I want the architect, especially if it's a new client for me, to see why my fee is what I'm proposing. I can show that I'll have all these sections, which will take me lots of time, so of course it will cost significant money. And if scope gets added after we agree on fee and services, I can show the architect what I had anticipated and what part of the additional scope would be additional services. The best time for me to do my table of contents is when I first look at the project, when I'm working on a proposal. Everything's fresh. I know I haven't considered anything before. It's the best time to think comprehensively about a project when I know my mind isn't confusing other projects with this new one. So creating this table of contents for me is not like building with Legos. Could you go to the next slide? It's like sculpting with stone. It starts with a big block that includes everything. Next slide. And then I just chip away all that's not part of the project. Next slide.
I think Michelangelo says something like that.
Yeah. And then you end up with what it's supposed to be after you take out everything that it's not supposed to include. If I didn't do it this way, I'd risk overlooking something, and I'm not comfortable with that risk. I approach a lot of things this way. When I pack for a long vacation, I open every drawer and look through my closet to make sure I've looked at everything I might possibly need. My husband has a different approach, and he forgets things. Next slide. I usually just use Master Spec's complete table of contents as my master table of contents. I think about all of the potential scope we may have on the project, and then delete what I know we don't need, subtracting from the master table of contents to get down to my project table of contents. Next slide. Next to the sections that I expect to be someone else's work, great. Ooh, that didn't turn out looking very good at all. Something got wonky in this slide, but what it shows is one of my project tables of contents, and next to certain sections it shows who I expect will complete the specification section. So the first one that's all messed up is food service equipment, and in parentheses next to that I had written to be completed by food service consultant. And then down below in earthwork and exterior improvements and utilities, I had some spec sections that I expected that the civil engineer would prepare. So Because I lay out my table of contents in this manner, I'm thinking about all the spec sections that everyone will need to do for the project manual. So I'm often the first person to notice scope omissions in progress sets. Usually it's just door hardware that I have to let my client know has been left out. But it's also been more urgent things like sub-drainage that no one's designed or even considered. I once talked to a good civil engineer and tried to find out why. He said he designed sub-drainage if asked to and paid for. I think that the approach that many architects consultants have is to only do things that are explicitly asked for. And in my mind, this is kind of the Lego approach, where you might miss things. Many architects seem to think that if it's needed for the project, one of the consultants will automatically do it. And some architects don't follow up to match project scope with consultants' proposals.
1 minute.
I believe that the owner's prime consultant on a project, usually the architect, needs to take the sculpture approach, the whole picture approach. The architect should not assume that the consultants have everything covered. They often don't, since they're using the Lego approach. Specifiers are extremely detail-oriented, but we know we have to lay out our plan of action first before getting deep into the details, so we usually see the big picture. And a lot of this comes from doing the table of contents early on. It acts as more than just a checklist. It's a way of thinking comprehensively about the project. This way we can help the architect catch scope busts, and we help the project, and we help the owner. That's it.
Thank you, Liz. Hey, and I'm looking at the Prezi that you posted, and I've got to vouch for you. The last slide that you have looks beautiful. We'll blame it on Lewis and his machine, or Microsoft. We'll love blaming Microsoft.
Bluebeam. Sometimes when people open things in Bluebeam that were created in Adobe, they turn out bad.
Okay. But thanks, Liz. Really appreciate it. And thanks for explaining what was going on here, even though it was not presenting the way that you intended. It turned out well.
Thanks.
All right,
Okay.
this is
Next.
it's supposed to be Bill DuBois next, but Bill, I have yet to get a hold of you to verify your audio is working. Bill, are you there, or should we keep working with you and move on to Vivian? Bill? Alrighty, sounds like I'm going to have to keep working with Bill. So, Lewis, if you could actually go back to where you just were. Vivian, I guess you are up while I continue to work with Bill on the back end.
Great, thank you. Lewis, there are lots and lots of slides here, so if you would just, if I say the words on the bottom of the screen, go ahead and advance the slide. I made this presentation when I found that I was frequently talking about my clients in terms of the love that I feel for the client or their inhabitants and how I want to protect them. So slip resistance is love.
Go ahead, Lewis.
That's your cue, Lewis. I have lots of projects going right now with that are elder care or that have fabulous materials. So I don't know why I'm not seeing my images. Because the whole point of this was to have the pictures.
Yes. Let me see if I can. Hey, Matt. Can you switch this over to me if Lewis's is not working there?
I can sure try, so let's see if we break everything right now.
Okay, give me a minute and see if I can get this to the right place and see if we can advance from there.
Thank you so
Okay.
much. Okay, we were with I Love Stone.
How's that?
And that's beautiful. So I love stone. Let's go to the next one. And I love tile. But most of all, I love the people who use my projects. And since people use the projects in so many ways, my job as a specifier is to protect them and keep them safe. I know I can't keep them safe all the time, but I want them to feel free to use the space however they see fit, and even if that means using it barefooted. One of my favorite projects right now is a Sikh temple. I'm working on it with a retired architect who's doing it pro bono because he's a member of the community, and so it's a real pet project. I'm taking especially good care of it, even though it's not something that can pay as much. The floors are made of smooth stone and, in some cases, smooth tile. You can advance. And many of the people who use the space are the parents and grandparents of people who have moved to Silicon Valley to work in high tech, and they've brought their parents or their grandparents with them. And so the congregation as a whole is aging, the active members. So the people who use the space every day are older. Many of the older Sikhs still practice foot washing, and so one of the spaces that we're creating is a new foot washing station where they'll walk through the foot bath and then dry their feet off, but they're walking with wet feet to a bench to sit down to dry off their feet, or to a low-mounted hand dryer. And thinking about the other traditions with ceremonial foot washing, I realized that there are an awful lot of contexts in which I might someday get to deal with wet, bare feet. So let's just go on from this slide, please. So we'll be dealing with wet floors. Floors will be wet. I was talking and my screen went away. We don't have wet stairs on this particular project, but it's important to also know that stairs might be wet too in some places. And the most important thing for this particular facility is that there's no shoes worn anywhere indoors. So I looked for the code and I didn't get enough support. The code requires slip resistance, but only for ceramic tile. The ADA actually it took out its slip resistance requirements, which we'll get to in a minute. But I needed a reliable test for any floor. And in learning about slip resistance, I knew this instinctively, but now the body of knowledge is so much better. We understand that dynamic testing is best. And that's because when people are moving, that's when they're more likely to slip. So the static test, the static coefficient of friction test that used to be in the ADA was, where is it? ASTM 1028. And it basically takes a weighed down rubber or leather, pretend it's a brick on a shoe, because it basically is. It sits this thing on the floor being tested, and then they attach a glorified fishing scale to it and pull and see how much force it takes to start a slip on a surface.
Okay, you have about a minute left, Vivian.
Okay, all right. Dynamic testing, on the other hand, starts with a moving object, a wheel, or in some cases a pendulum, and measures the resistance that the floor gives it. So we just talked about that ADA had that static coefficient of friction ripped out of it about a decade ago, and we've been going with nothing for a while. Let's go on. There are dynamic coefficient of friction tests that are better. I've started specifying ANSI B101.3 on projects other than ceramic tile because it's a wet test. It's a wheel with a little bit of detergent and water on it. These coefficients are magic numbers that have to do with nothing as far as I can tell, but the dynamic coefficient of friction for this test that is about adequate is 0.30. You can lose that one to contamination pretty easily, so we go with a higher dynamic coefficient of friction of 0.42 because even with maintenance variation, it's reliable. So we can assure slip resistance, and even in the presence of moisture because it's a wet test to begin with. And that keeps my charges on their feet. That's all. Where are my questions?
Everybody's getting off easily today. We're going through this so quickly, nobody's even has time to write the questions. Thank you, Vivian. That was great.
You're welcome. I'm going to peek at the Twitter and see if anybody said anything. Hi, Sharif. Thanks.
Okay. Matt, how are you doing with Bill?
Bill, if you can hear us, I've unmuted you. Bill, are you there?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. So
Oh, good.
we're getting close. So I guess, Dave, are you ready to be able to do Bill's, or should I switch it back over to Lewis? Oh, looks like we see it here.
Yeah,
I'm
let
ready.
me see if I can do this and get it to work.
And, okay.
Should I start here, right? Yes, go ahead.
No, back up one. There you go. Let's start there. Okay, you ready?
Go ahead.
We're ready.
Can we go? Okay, good. Well, first of all, this is a free-form thing, and I get to do whatever I want to do. So I chose an issue that's been coming up quite frequently in my office, and that's specifying concrete floor finishes. And it gets to be quite a challenge. And first of all, I'm going to ask all the questions today. I'm going to be asking you more questions than leading you down any informative path. But my big deal that I'm trying to do is how do I align expectations of what the designer thinks they're going to get with what the owner thinks they're going to get, and how am I going to specify it to have a successful project. I've been seeing this growing trend for concrete floor finishes in our office, so it's a big question in my mind. Next slide.
Okay.
So, first of all, my biggest problem is what is this designer designing, or what are they envisioning in their mind? What are they trying to communicate? And first of all, are they communicating it properly to the owner or client? And then how do I get that same picture in my head so I know what to specify? But as you can see right in some of these photographs, there's a lot of variation of what's available for concrete floor finishes, whether it's ground and polished to a high level, whether it's stamped and textured or dyed, and in some cases it's stenciled with a pattern, as you can see in the center photograph. And then down in the lower right corner, there's toppings where you can have a concrete finished topping that's applied over a slab. And the upper right corner is showing where it's just being sealed. It's a typical concrete floor sealed. So what is a sealed concrete or polished concrete? And I get designers who are mixing those terms up and not really being clear about what they think. So let's go to the next slide. My next question, well, what is the owner, what's been communicated? What are the designers who are speaking with their clients? What image are they projecting to the client? And as you can see, upper right corner, it is a highly polished, very glossy, highly reflective finish, versus on the far left, it's a stamped concrete that's highly textured and colored. But in the center upper picture, it's a stencil. So they've actually done a lot of graphic design on the concrete floor just by stenciling stains onto the finish and polishing it. And the lower right corner actually is showing concrete tiles, which we've had on projects recently, and I've had some issues come about with that as well. So there's a lot of different possibilities of what a concrete floor finish really is, and I'm concerned that the communication between client, designer, and specifier is sometimes confused. Let's go to the next slide. So when I get some instruction from the designer about what they want, oftentimes they say, well, I want a concrete floor, and they haven't even thought clearly about what that might mean. and whether it's polished or sealed, or whether it's stained and patterned. So then I have a lot of, once I kind of start to begin to understand what it is that they've envisioned, I have a hard time figuring out, well, where am I going to specify this? Is it a Division 3 section where it's finishing the concrete? It may be an existing slab, it may be a new slab, it may be polished, maybe I don't know how they're finishing it, or maybe a topping applied to that slab, or there's actually cast underlayment section, which I threw in here. Actually, underlayments are not a finished surface, and you can't really, you can self-level, but you can't leave that as an exposed finished surface, except some manufacturers now are manufacturing products that are self-leveling wear surfaces that are finished surfaces. And I have not found a good place in master format where they would be specified. And then last but not least, the floor treatment section in Division 9 talks about coatings that can be applied. In some cases, designers are talking about polished concrete as being nothing but a concrete slab that has a shiny coating surface to it. So, and of course that's going to be a much different cost issue than, say, ground and polished. So again, it gets down to a matter of clear communication. Let's go to the next slide. So after we've gotten through with what the designer and the owner thinks, well, how am I going to convey that effectively to a contractor who can price it properly, understand what the finished effect is? Can I just specify the sheen level, the stains, the materials? It's not only a matter of specifying what the products are, but largely it's going to be involving what is the quality of the workmanship and what is the sub's ability to achieve the expected finish. And I want to be able to clearly document that. I don't know of any industry standards that I can refer to, or in many cases even what terminology needs to be used, of what test methods for. I can do a sheen level test, that's easy enough, but how do I specify the grinding process? Do I need to specify that? How do I really convey what the finished surface is to be? So anyhow, I want to make sure that the contractor is pricing things accurately, that we can help the contractor will find a qualified installer that's capable of doing this work, and then I need to know how I can measure the results, actually specify it so that they are measurable results that can be verified. Next slide.
About a minute left, Bill.
Oh, good. So, and then here's what the contractor will deliver. Actually, go to that. Can you actually click on one of the images? I think you can zoom in, and then I can zoom back out again. And then next image over. Okay, so now go next one, or right. Just there you go. This is a job that was delivered where it was a topping. They wanted a concrete look on a project, and as you can see, the workmanship wasn't quite what we had hoped for. And we're going to talk more about that project in a second. This one just shows where they're stenciling a pattern on the floor, and it's the process involved. And actually that's Chris Swanson, who's a great artist with doing strained concrete, and this is one of his projects, which I thought was rather impressive. Let's go to the next slide. So will the client be satisfied? Actually, the picture on the left, which is a great installation, Chris Swanson installed, had to deal with an existing slab in an old building, which the slab was cracked and whatever, and he actually filled. Can you click on that image, the first one? Mm-hmm. And he actually filled the cracks and then did the staining and stenciling, and it turned out in the setting of this historic building, it really looked good because it had this aged look to it. The client was totally unsatisfied. He expected this perfect image and actually had it redone and had it ripped out after all this work was done. So it's really important to get the client expectation right. The next three slides are of a project that happened to us personally. We had a topic. No, I'm sorry, go back to the next previous.
Okay, but you are out of time, Bill. You are.
Can you go to the next slide real quick?
Okay.
So I asked a lot of questions, and really, the last one. No. Next image. Just keep going all the way out to the very last slide. Keep going forward.
All right.
So I'm presenting at Construct, and I'm talking on this subject and helping. If you have any ideas of what we can do to do things better, please let me know.
All right. And Bill, I didn't get a chance to introduce you properly. Bill DuBois from Gensler, Chief Specifier in New York City, so really appreciate you helping out with the presentation today, Bill.
Happy to do so. Thank you.
All right, Louis, you've been quiet. We threw you off the presentation. Okay, so next up we have Paul Gerber. You with us, Paul?
I sure am.
All right. So Paul's a specifier from north of the border in outside of, what do you call home? Not Toronto anymore.
No, well, I work in Toronto, but Waterloo's home.
Okay.
Home of BlackBerry.
Okay. Specifier with Dialogue, a firm that has multiple offices throughout Canada. And Paul did this presentation for CSC's National Convention, or at least part of it.
Yeah, this is the extremely scaled down version today. Dave can attest that I got so much conversation going in this this presentation that it went to almost an hour and 20 minutes from my hour. So, but yeah, I had to throw in some props to Ron Guerin. Ron did a similar presentation to this a couple years ago at Construct, and graciously shared his presentation with me, which I used to build on this. So thanks, Ron, even though you're not here. So I looked at guide specs, manufacturer's guide specs, and it's always a challenge, and you get 5 different opinions when you talk to 4 different specifiers about the usefulness of them. So I sort of hit the top pet peeves of mine as far as manufacturer's specs goes, and typically we were using them when at the 11:30 mark of the project, and we're scrambling to try and get those surprises done. So number 10 is not following CSI or CSC standards, section format and page format. You know, article names that don't follow what the recommendations are, terminology that we don't use within the specifications. You know, things like scope includes or you know, scope of work, inspections, that sort of thing. Next slide, Dave. Not following CSC, CSI standards for section numbering and titling. You get into old master format 1995 sections, or the one that I had in my presentation everybody should get a charge out of was section 07500. Elastomeric modified built-up roofing, SEBS modified mopping bitumen, 2-ply polyester felt, and SEBS cap sheet over insulated deck was the section title. I'm just wondering how you would ever get that into a header or footer on a project spec. Next slide, number 8. Not following CSC or CSI standards for specification language. Things like using the imperative mood. The transmitter shall do this, the transmitter shall do that, the transmitter shall do the other. Using inconsistent wording. I had an example where it showed crack isolation membrane to comply with, and then the next paragraph said the sound isolation membrane to be non-toxic. And then finally the third paragraph actually had wire reinforcing : 2x2 inch, etc. So within 3 paragraphs you had 3 different uses of terminology, which all adds to our workload when we're trying to craft this into the final product. Using non-mandatory language, things like the spray nozzle should be, well, that doesn't help us out much when we're giving requirements for the project. Number 7, including nonsensical provisions or inappropriate content. And there I showed examples where manufacturers were trying to affect the bidding requirements of the project or the contracting requirements of the project, or including what should have been in spec notes as requirements of the project, which didn't make any sense. Number 6, sorry. improper use of reference articles or use of outdated references. And this went all across the spectrum from not having a references standard article in Part 1, which I know is always a debate among specifiers too. My thought is that if you're just referring to a standard in Part 2 or Part 3, I want some more where I'm showing the person what exactly the standard is that I'm referring to with a date, because different codes require different standards, dates. So the one that I had example was ASTM E119, standard test for methods of fire tests of building constructions and materials. And it was listed, but my question is, what version of it are you complying to? Is it 1998, 2000, 2005, 2007, 2008, 2011, or maybe 2012? So that's why I think it's important that the standards are listed and the dates included. Number 5, not including spec notes to assist the specifier. There's all kinds of options, and I said, believe it or not, specifiers don't know everything about every product out there. And I know that's shocking to some product reps because they think that, you know, we either know everything or we know nothing, so we're sort of halfway in between. But, you know, add some spec notes in to help us out so that we understand what the different options are and limitations that may be in. Over-specifying product characteristics, and I gave an example where there's so many ASTM, a list of about 8 ASTM tests that were passed and values, but there was really one overarching standard that if it met this standard, everything else was automatically taken care of. Number 3. Next one. There we go. Product specifications that are covertly proprietary. And I gave some examples in there where, and we've all seen it, where there's so many characteristics of a project or of a product that are listed that there's no way that any other product could ever hope to meet all of the the characteristics of it. So, you know, it's really setting the specifier up unwittingly that they're single sourcing a product because that's the only product that can meet those requirements. Number 2. Over or underutilizing Part 3 requirements. And this goes from the only thing in Part 3 basically says install to, in accordance with manufacturer's printed instructions, which I know Sheldon just loves brevity, but I think there's a happy medium with that and not giving a step-by-step analysis of what exactly needs to be done, which infringes on the contractor's responsibility for means and methods. But including the important critical steps that shouldn't be overlooked or that want to make sure that are addressed to ensure a proper installation. And the number 1 is providing guide spec only in PDF format, not knowing how effectively to use Microsoft Word. And in there I asked the question, how many people write letters using Acrobat? I don't know too many specifiers that edit their specs in Acrobat. Other sins within this one are when people use Word as a typewriter and everything's in normal and there's no auto numbering and there's no formatting, and when you try and copy and paste it just adds so many steps to it. So that's the quick down version of it, and my main purpose for doing this at the CSC conference was to give back to the product rep community for all the support that they give us on a day-to-day basis, and it, like I say, spawned some really good conversation and even some follow-up after the conference from reps asking questions about things. So.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Hey, you got some nice
No
comments
problem.
too. Another pet peeve by others. Karen Wood loves your number 1 pet peeve.
Excellent.
Okay. Now we're going from specifications to something a little bit more technical in producing the specifications. Dave Lorenzini. Dave, are you on the line with us?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So you're going to explain some intricacies of actually using Word to produce specs.
Yes. I'm going to try to show how this technique can be used using field codes in Microsoft Word. And we're going to be working with Microsoft Word version 2003, which uses the pull-down menus. The other versions of Microsoft Word have similar access to dialog boxes, and maybe someday we'll update it. What you see on the screen right now is the reference to another part of the specifications that we want to link in our explanation of this particular paragraph. And I'm going to say beep when I want you to beep, but this slide shows you the final result, and it's selected by your mouse at this point. So beep. Okay, this is the target of the reference that we want to show up above, and right at this point, fabrication article 2.82 is the article, and paragraph H is the H that we want to reference. They're shown as split screen because they're actually so far apart they're in different pages. Beep. This shows the first thing you're going to have to do is make sure that your bookmarks view is checked off. Beep. You get to this through the Tools Options pull-down menu, and you can see bookmarks on the left we just showed you. But on the right, there's the field codes that we're going to work with, and the field shading should always be selected. So at this point, you select always. Beep. The next thing to do is to set up your bookmark. We're going to bookmark the fabrication article, and so we select the number from the with the cursor so it actually shows shaded. Beep. Okay, we go to Insert Bookmark and click on Bookmark. Beep. And we'll come up with a bookmark dialog box. And the first thing we have to do is create a name for the label that we're going to apply to that 2.82. And the way I like to work it is that I take a piece of the article name, which is fabrication, call it fab, and then a piece of the paragraph level, which is an article, so we call it art, and I put them together. So the first one would be fab art. We know it's the article that's the fabrication article. Beep. And this is what it looks like when you hit add, and it puts the bookmark brackets around it. Beep. Then we do the same thing with the paragraph, and in the same sense we have fab par for the paragraph, and if you have subparagraphs you can have fab sub or sub 1, sub 2, depending how far down you go with your reference. Beep. Okay, so once we applied the bookmarks, we're going to go back to the reference paragraph or the place mark, and I've marked it with a red box so that you can see what we're doing. Now I couldn't show the cursor at this point, but you put your cursor after the word article, after the space. So that's where the number is going to show. Beep. Okay, so now we go to the insert reference, which is right below the bookmark in the pull down, and then when we click on reference we get another group dialog, and we click on cross-reference. Beep. And then you do the pull down, and the pull down is in a default order at this point, so numbered items shows first. But we click on bookmark. Beep. And in the bookmark, in the cross-reference dialog, we find the bookmarks that we've inserted already in the specification, in the section, and we go down to fab art, and you can tell that if you precede all of your bookmarks in similar bookmarks in one with the same first letter, they'll sort together, so they're easier to find later on. So we select fab art and we click on insert. Beep. And right away the number appears down next to article, as you can see. And what happens is that you can leave the dialog cross-reference dialog box open. The cursor is still after the number, and you have access to it, and you can put your separator in there. In this case, we show a hyphen. Beep. Okay, the next thing is to go back and highlight the paragraph label and click Insert. Beep. And the H, the paragraph letter, appears. At this point, you can click Cancel, and the dialog box will go away. Beep. and there's your final result. You take out the spaces which wouldn't be there in the first place, but so that's how we achieve it. And you might wonder now why or how does it actually change after you delete or make revisions to your specification where that's not the final location. What you're going to have to do is make sure that when you go to your Tools Options box that you click on the General tab and go down to Update Automatic Links at Open, so that when you open your document, your links will automatically correct themselves. Now, sometimes it'll work out that when you print, it'll automatically do it as well, but I can't guarantee that. I know it works on my system, but I can't guarantee it works on everybody else. And that's it. I think if this went a little too fast, then maybe you can watch it later on online if you want to make up. But I'm trying to make sure that Cheryl doesn't blame me for losing time. Thank you. That's it.
Well, thanks, Dave. And you finished a bit early. That was great. Word has a lot of features that I'm sure many of us are not doing, or not taking advantage of, and this is probably one of those hidden things that a lot of us will have not even explored. So appreciate your sharing that.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, you forgot a piece.
Well,
I
forgot that I added this because if you left that box that says hyperlink, that means if you ever clicked on the reference that it would actually jump to the other location, which could be annoying. So my recommendation is leave it off unless you find some benefit to clicking it. That's it.
Okay, good. Thanks, Dave. And last but not least, save the best for last, right, Cheryl? You with us, Cheryl? Cheryl. Matt, can you tell me if she's still on the call?
She says she's still. It looks like she's still on the call, and her line looks to be unmuted. So, Cheryl, it may be that you muted your phone itself. It's a hardware button.
Muted. Unmuted.
Okay, it looks like I got muted. I'm not sure, so that might be Cheryl trying to unmute herself. So Cheryl, if you click the little phone next to your name or in the GoToWebinar panel, there is a button to unmute as well.
It says I'm unmuted.
There we go. You are unmuted.
There you are. Thank you, Cheryl. Thanks for your patience hanging in to the end. So,
are you hearing? Okay. Can you hear me?
We can. Okay, so last up is Cheryl Hansen, a specifier from West Coast. We won't hold that against you. But also, Cheryl's been working on the CSI government credential program as the piece for the CDT, geared specifically to government. So she wanted to give us an update. All right, so Cheryl, it's all yours.
Go for the next slide, please.
Sure. Patience.
There we go. So I'm glad to be here to give you a little update on what's going on with this project that we've been talking about as the CDT plus G for a long time. It's changing, and I want you to know about it. Next slide, please. I want to invite anyone who's going to be at Construct to please come to a session that we're going to have on Wednesday of Construct from 4:30 to 5:30 in room 301, which I believe is the CSI room. There will be representatives from the task team and from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers there to explain our project more completely than I probably can do today in a hurry. Next slide, please. What's going on is that we're developing a credential to enable people to show that they know how the construction is done based on CSI principles and the Federal Acquisition Regulation. This project was authorized by the CSI board in June of 2011, and once we get it launched, it will be the first new CSI credential launched in almost 25 years. Next slide, please. The reason we're doing this is that the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Specification Steering Committee asked CSI if we could use our expertise and infrastructure to create a credential that they could use to help advance their employees' careers and to help differentiate architects and engineers who submit on proposals for government projects. Next slide, please. The people involved in this are widespread. The CSI Board of Directors has been supportive. We have more than one task team working on it. We have staff. The Army Corps of Engineers has representatives from the CSSC, and they've appointed subject matter experts from as many as 6 districts of the Corps and from headquarters. We have a representative from NASAC and from NASA. We've tried to get others, GSA and VA. We're still working on that. And CSI has hired a credentialing consultant, International Credentialing Associates, Inc., to help us through this process. Next slide, please. This is a photo of some of us who were involved in a meeting in December at the Baltimore District headquarters. You may recognize some of the CSI representatives. They're volunteer professional individuals who are very knowledgeable in our CDT and CCS bodies of knowledge, FAR contracting requirements, teaching CDT classes, people who've served at all levels at CSI. And then we have the subject matter experts from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and the Specification Steering Committee. Next slide, please. Our charge is first to conduct a body of knowledge analysis to determine what the components, the competencies are that are required for someone to show that they would deserve such a credential, what they need to know. So we created a survey of knowledge statements that we think are required. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. We found that we needed a glossary of terms because we were confusing each other. There are terms that are the same but have different meanings between government and private sector work, and there are terms that are different but have the same meanings. So we're working to try to put that all in one place to make it easier to understand. The process for creating a new exam involves writing questions. So they're called items. We have to write them. We have to pre-test them before we can launch an exam. Next slide, please. This is an approximate time schedule. And lest I forget to say this, a big part of this also is to create education to support this credential. We're not going to just throw it out on the street without any education. So I'll come back to that. We had our meeting to develop the survey in December, and we had it ready to go in February. It got put on hold for a while till we got approval from the Corps headquarters. I have written this, expected to launch the survey on August 14th. That has been pushed to August 21st. So on the 21st, as CSI members, you will likely get an email with a link to a survey. Please respond. I'll say that again in a minute. But if you don't receive a link, you can contact me and I can make sure that you get it. If you look at the survey and you know somebody else in your office or among your consultants who might be a good person to respond to the survey, you can, I believe you can pass it along. So I'll verify that. We'll talk more about that in September. Once we get the results, we're going to analyze them. We're going to develop the test specifications, which means we determine how much of each knowledge statement needs to be on the test, how many questions we need for it. We hope to get that done by the end of October. We'll be preparing items over the course of time, hopefully finish towards the first of the year, and get the test format and all done in mid-2015. Next slide, please.
You only have a couple of, you have about half a minute left here, Cheryl, but I know you got to the end, so go ahead.
The rest of this is process that will go on in 2015. Next slide, please. And if we're lucky, we may launch this exam in the spring of 2016. Next slide. The source materials we're working with are the two practice guides noted here. The core has what they call a prospect course on specifications for construction contracts, which incorporates a lot of material from our practice guides and the FAR. We're also looking to source to the glossary, maybe the whole building design guide, maybe a new book that incorporates those. The way you can get involved, and please do so, respond to the survey when it comes. If you're at Construct and can come to our session, we'll give you more information. You can meet the task team and people from the core. If you have knowledge that's specific to government projects or contacts with other agencies, step up, tell us who you are. We don't know everyone and what their experience is. Any kind of DoD experience can be helpful. So next slide. Here's some contact information, emails for me as chair of this task team. Neil Davison is chairing the education task team. Stephen Nash, the strategic task team, which is overseeing and developing policy. And my board liaison is Ron Guerin. You can contact any of us to let them know if you've got something you would like to contribute. Otherwise, I hope to see many of you at Construct. We'll talk more and in more detail about what's going on. I appreciate this opportunity. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Cheryl. Thanks for presenting. And we had one question asking about when is this presentation at Construct. I'll try to get back to the top slide. It's right here for those of you that were asking. Right?
Wednesday at 30.
Okay. So this was an experiment this month, something entirely different. I hope it was enjoyable to everybody that was on the call. I'd like to hear your comments, what you thought. Was it worthwhile? Is it something that you'd like to see repeated sometime in the future? So if you would, write to Lewis, write to me, or write to Matt, and we'll collect your comments. And if you liked it, we will see what we can do to repeat it. So thank you so much for joining. Thanks for hanging in a little bit past the time and giving our speakers their due time to present. And thank you, everybody, all of our volunteers, for making this presentation happen today. We'll see you next month on the 4th.